Hello there, my beautiful, beautiful friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK, and in today's video, I just wanted to give you a quick update on Polkadot, or the coin known as the crypto coin known as DOT, or at least that's the ticker, DOT. I've had several videos I've put out over the past week and a half, just kind of eyeing levels for breakout entries, retest entries, and so on. But I just want to put out an update and be very transparent. I feel like in order for my channel to have potential to grow over time, it's important that I'm very transparent and, not always mega bearish, not always mega bullish, just basically being very honest with what I'm doing, not trying to hype a coin up and telling you to buy it when, potentially it's entering areas that I wouldn't personally be buying it. Now, if you've watched some of my previous videos, which we're going to go over a little bit in today that I put out about DOT, we spoke about the breakout of the 825 area. That's where I got my entry at. And right now we are breaking through the area, or we did break through the area that I spoke about in my most previous video, which I will leave a link in the description for, which was around the $9.20 area. We are looking for potentially a retest entry there if you're not already in the coin, and that's what I'm going to speak about in today's video. However, your risk to reward at this point isn't nearly as high as it was back down at 825. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if this was me and I wasn't already in the coin and didn't already have exposure from down at lower levels, I don't know that I would be eyeing an entry here without Bitcoin giving me a little bit more of some confidence that it's going to continue to push higher. It has pushed higher today so far after the CPI news came out, and I will put out a video later today kind of with my market update on Bitcoin, the SPX and so forth, and kind of what I think would happen with that. And if it were to happen, some of the upside ideas anyways, well then I would have more confidence in potentially entering DOT even with a new position, with some potential upside that's worth it. But I just want to be transparent up front that right now I have personally moved my stop loss up to around $8.73, which is in profits for me since my original entry was $8.25. I've also took half of my profits already off the table. That was my goal, basically anywhere under $10. And once we broke through, I went ahead and just closed half the position. Now I am looking to potentially add more to it or re-enter, which we're going to speak about in this video. But again, just want to be very, very transparent with what I'm doing. And if you're not in the coin yet, manage your risk accordingly. Now, if this sounds interesting to you guys, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's talk about it. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Okay, so I figured that what I would do is I would start us out here on the daily chart. Now, this is on Bybit. This is actually just the DOT perpetual contract that they have on Bybit. Basically, the futures or the perps. Leverage trading essentially. And this is the chart, this is the daily chart. And the reason why I want to start with this is just kind of want to help you understand, zoomed out before we zoom in, exactly why the targets that I have are the targets that I have. And why, at this point, I've been taking some profits and also bumping my stop loss up. And this is why. So just a glance at the daily, you can see that clearly from when we had our top back in early November of last year, that, DOT at one point had dropped all the way from $55-ish, clear down to its low at about $6, which was about almost 90% of its value, right? But before it had the crazy run that began in July, so midsummer of last year, which, coincidentally, that's kind of where we are now, right? Midsummer, or well, end of summer almost. But anyway, you can see that DOT was out down here hanging out between about $10. There's a wick right here if we zoom in. Let me move my head out of the way. Down to about $10.30, up to where the bodies closed at about just under $11. So if we were to do a couple of lines right there, and then we can even go up a little further. So as we discuss, the next levels, you can see there's this wick back here of support around $13.50, $14 almost, same thing, support previously, and now it'll definitely act as resistance at some point in the future if we go that high. Now, the reason I brought this main level up is you guys know on my channel I like to think of support and resistance as zones. So back, when we were zoomed out, the top of the zone was just under $11, and the bottom of the zone was just under $10.50, about $10.40. If we were to make this little zone and then change it to red, this is kind of once we start to zoom in, you'll see kind of why I'm starting to be a little hesitant about how much further we can go in the short term, unless Bitcoin, of course, just breaks out and goes to the moon, because we've already, our entry idea from our first video that I put out, I'd have to look back at it exactly. I know we were talking about waiting for the break of the 825 zone. I don't remember what price action was at exactly when we were talking about it. It was obviously below that, and we were discussing a daily candles breaking above that level, which was my 825 zone, and I was basing that on the daily chart. This is where it first attempted to break out, but both candles did not close above 825. The first one did. It closed clear up here at like 860, but then the following candle was at around 815, 820. So it pulled back, and then we didn't enter at that point. And then the next video that I put out a few days later was a more aggressive zoomed in entry as we were approaching that level again. We nailed that entry at just over 825. You can kind of see here too that this was the retest of that zone, and on top of the zone, 825 to 830. Basically, it was this zone right in here that was my zone that I had been talking about in the video. Right around there. You know, this is the Bybit chart, so it's a little different than the Binance chart that I was showing on that video. But essentially, this is what we were looking for. We got that bounce, you know, that retest and that entry. And then I mentioned that the first level I'd take some profits at would be just under $9. I took some profits there, then bumped my stop loss up to break even, which was at 825. I just posted something in my Telegram group a bit ago mentioning that I'd moved my stop loss up again. I believe I put it at let's see, I don't remember what it was, 857 or something. Let me actually look at that real quick, just so I'm being accurate over here. Moving my stop loss up to 873. Yeah, that's what it was, 873. So that would have been right here. We'll change that to red. And the reason that I bumped my stop loss up to there is you can kind of see that after we had this latest push up to around $9 a few days ago, and then it pulled back. And then that's just where this daily candle today opened, was above that level. So I was just putting it back below the body of that candle a little bit. If you know, and I'll set an alert as well, or I have an alert already set on my other chart, that if we approach back there, it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to, you know, that I don't think DOT can't bounce from there. I just want to secure profits at that point and potentially look to re-enter, and of course keep an eye on what Bitcoin's doing. But I wanted to start out before we, you know, just on this chart, just to kind of explain that if we continue to push higher, and you know, you can see clearly that this zone above us, which was major resistance back here, well, support obviously previously, and then that zone after we broke down became the resistance right in this area, that's kind of the I guess short-term ceiling for DOT, unless Bitcoin, you know, breaks out and drags it higher. We're already at 950. $10 is an even number, so you're going to see a lot of profits start to get taken under that if, you know, if it pushes higher. And if it ultimately breaks through $10, well then, you know, this zone between about $10.40 and just under $11 is going to be a very, very profit heavy taking zone. Okay, now that you understand the major overhead resistance, we're now over here on the DOT 4-hour chart. You'll notice in this video I'm not talking about the indicators, any of that. We're just focused purely on price action and levels of interest. Now, Bitcoin just pushed higher above like 24,300, you know, at the time I'm making this video, and so I'm guessing it's gonna, you know, find a real short-term top and need to pull back some. So some of these ideas as far as pushing higher in the short term may not come to fruition, and so you may be able to look for some of these retest entry ideas, as Bitcoin most likely needs to, you know, retrace a little and retest 24K or possibly 23,000 like 800, some of those levels down there, right? Maybe even 23,600. So this is the 4-hour chart, and we talked about this in the previous video. This inverse head and shoulders broke to the upside. This is what ended up invalidating our first attempt at the 825 entry zone, because it ended up retesting all the way back to the top of this trend line, which was previously resistance, resistance, resistance. This was left shoulder, head, shoulder. Just a pattern that I don't necessarily trade based off of, but I always take note of, and you know, and I even put the measured move for that just because, you know, I had some confluence with this resistance area back here in previous support. So that is one of the measured moves that we're looking at, which is the closest one to where we're at now, which is the overhead $10 resistance. But if you get a pullback, set some alerts at these areas. What we're still looking for as far as maintaining an uptrend, which would just be, you know, the basics of having a high, you know, a low. You know, this is so far we do have a higher high right here. This was a higher low. Now this is the breakout entry that I previously posted in my last video, and so that's the first entry you'd be looking for, is something back down around the 920 area. If that doesn't hold, you know, the key with these entries is to not go in all at once anyways. You do want to kind of dollar cost average into them. So you'd put an entry down there just over 920, maybe 922.3, somewhere in that range. If that fills, set a stop loss back down maybe just below this next area that I have as the higher low retest option. I guess I spelled it wrong. I put restest option. Should be retest. But anyway, and that's down here right around $8.85. That would be the area that I would expect if we do pull back further to bounce, because that would be a higher low than this low. And then at that point, I'd set my stop loss back down just below this green box, somewhere back down near my original entry. This is talking about if you are entering now and you're not already in the coin like I am. This is how I would do it. And then I'd put a stop loss back down under 825, because to me, if we come back down to this zone again, that's going to be a lower high. And then at that point, we're most likely just going to put in a higher low and fall over and start to create some sort of like a falling wedge, right? Which would bounce at some point. But anyway, we're trying to avoid, or hope that we can avoid that if Bitcoin and the regular market can continue to push higher. So this is kind of the way that I would play it if you're not already in the coin. Is let's just say for an example, you had $100 that you were wanting to enter into the coin, and you just want to do it at two different entry points, $50, $50. You could do the first 50 right here at around the 920, just over 920 area if we get that pullback. And then if that fall, breaks down, then you would look to add the other 50 down here at just under $9 at like 885, 890. And then you would have a stop loss set just in case the market turns over and goes to the downside, somewhere back under 825, maybe like 819, 817, something like that. And, your average entry at that point would be somewhere between these two, right? So something around $9.05, we'll just say. And so your stop loss would be basically giving you about a 10%. Let's just say you put it down here around $8.15. That's a max loss of around 10%. So if that fits your, risk to reward ratio, or fits your, risk management criteria, then that would be something you could look into doing. It is a little bit higher risk at this point to enter anything until we see if Bitcoin can actually put in a higher high than its previous high. And we'll talk about that in a video I put out later today. But if it can, then you would look for DOT to at the very least test this zone up here that I just spoke about on the daily chart between around $10. Well, this is the first zone, sorry. This is the overhead target for the measured move of the inverse head and shoulders at about $10. And then beyond that, you look for the bigger retest of that other zone, which is clear up close to $11, right? And so at this point, as far as our first target, we're only about 5 to 7% away from it. So risk to reward at this point, especially if you were going to be entering with the idea of losing potentially 10%, that wouldn't fit my personal risk to reward criteria. But just wanted to point out that there is still some upside potential for DOT, so do keep an eye on it. And thank you so much for stopping by. I do really, really appreciate you guys and girls that are watching the channel. And as always, if you're liking the content, please remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you tomorrow. It's